Hey, I'm Andrea, and in this video we're going to talk about Rays prospect Taj Bradley's Major League debut, which was Wednesday against the Red Sox. He finished with a final line of 5 innings pitched, 5 hits, 3 earned runs, and 8 strikeouts, and he showed us 4 pitches throughout the outing, and that's the four-seam, the cutter, the curveball, and the changeup. The changeup might actually be a splitter, but I couldn't tell from the video what his grip was, so we could look into that another time, but he barely threw it, so I'm not really going to talk about that pitch in this video. The four-seam and the cutter were the 2 pitches he leaned on most, but he occasionally mixed in that curveball and threw it more a second time through the order. If we look at this pitch chart, we can see that each pitch has unique movement. The four-seam gets above average ride, the curveball gets good depth, and then each of the 3 main pitches that he threw, that four-seam, the cutter, and the curveball, all have a nice velocity gap between them especially that cutter breaks up the velo gap between the four-seam and the curveball. So that's forcing hitters not only to adjust to different movement profiles, but also to different timing. So let's walk through the start. We'll start with the first time through the order. And the first time through the order, we saw a heavy mix of four-seams and cutters. And he mixed which of those pitches he threw first pitch, and he actually threw more off-speed and breaking pitches than he did fastballs first pitch. In 2-strike counts, he went to the four-seam the majority of the time as an out pitch. We didn't see that curveball until the 7th batter, who was Reese McGuire, but from then on, the curveball was either used early in the count or as an additional option for an out pitch with the four-seam. The second time through the order, we saw that curveball a lot more frequently, but he still relied on the four-seam and the cutter primarily. He trusted each of the 3 pitches against both hands, and he used all 3 as first pitch, but was mostly first pitch, four-seam, and curveball. And the same goes for the counts with 2 strikes, the out pitch. He used all 3, but he was mainly the four-seam and the curveball. So just some main takeaways that I noticed that I'm going to be watching moving forward. He felt comfortable using all 3 of his pitches to both hands. He feels comfortable starting an at-bat with any of his 3 main pitches, that four-seam, cutter, or curveball. He's not afraid to switch things up or throw any of his pitches in any situation, which is super exciting in my opinion, because he's not going to be very predictable. And then in 2-strike counts, he leans mostly on that four-seam and curveball. He was struggling a bit with command, especially early on in the game, but I think that was just because it was his debut and he was excited. But the command issues came especially with his four-seam. He was missing up a lot. And his four-seam is good enough to be thrown in zone and get in-zone miss, and I think we saw a couple of swings from the Red Sox that really displayed the ride that the four-seam is getting. I think if he could focus that four-seam to the middle and upper third of the zone, he'd get a lot more swing and miss out of it next time he pitches. The curveball ended up in the heart of the plate a little more frequently than I think he would have liked for a 77-mile-per-hour curveball. Though I like that pitch, I think it would perform better if he was able to throw it to the lower half of the zone. That way you had the riding fastball to the upper half, the depthy curveball to the lower half, and then that cutter moving glove side in the middle of the zone. So that would be 3 different pitches moving in different directions with a 9-mile-per-hour velocity gap between each one. And speaking of velocity, Bradley did a really good job of maintaining his throughout his start. His 78th pitch was his four-seam fastball, and it was 96 miles per hour, and it stayed in that 94 to 97 range throughout the entire outing. Bradley had the opportunity to make his debut because of Zach Eflin's injury, but he's off to a really promising start. He had 3 solid weapons that he was able to use. He looked very comfortable, and I think once he settles in, he's going to be a really tough pitcher to face. If you like this video, please subscribe and follow me on Twitter @ScalcoReport. Thanks for watching!